Hey everybody, what up? All right, so this has been in the news recently where Microsoft laid off 9,000 employees, while at the same time hiring quite a bit overseas. And we're going to talk about that in this video. And really the question of whether or not Microsoft is gaming the H-1B system and or just simply trying not to hire Americans to save money. Now, I think it's actually a complicated discussion. This is a sensitive topic. But the bottom line is that Microsoft just cut 9,000 associates from their workforce. So currently, Microsoft employs 228,000 people globally and 120,000 people in the United States. And that's now 9,000 less because all of these 9,000 workers were in the United States. Now, what has people in an uproar is at the same time, Microsoft has 28,000 visas, 28,858 H-1B visa requests that have been made over the last 3 years. So basically that number equates to the amount of layoffs that they've been doing in the United States. So it's actually quite clear that their intention is to not hire in the United States and to hire overseas, most of that being in India. But there is a lot of actual hiring going on overseas in South America, also in Europe, China, and other places. So, I mean, it's certainly a global world. This isn't anything really new. I mean, we've been seeing this in IT since probably the early 90s. And I think it ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's worse than others. Right now, the job market is absolutely atrocious. And this is just not great timing for a lot of people that are out there looking for work. Another thing, when one company starts doing this, it seems like they all get a free pass to just start laying off whoever they want. And it just becomes the norm, right? But when a market is healthy and there's a lot of hiring going on and there's poaching and things of that nature, no company wants to be in the spotlight of announcing layoffs. Typically, that is associated with something that's pretty bad. And you know, even if somebody doesn't work for the company in the past, it's like, you know, they think negatively of that company and sometimes will outright boycott them. Similar to, you know, to just social issues that you see out there, like with Target being boycotted right now. So Microsoft is investing heavily overseas. Here's an article that they're investing $3 billion in India to expand their AI and cloud capacity. Here's one of their C-suite staffs talking about no layoffs in India. Says Microsoft India and South Asia's head, Puneet Chandak. So if you're overseas, then this is obviously good news for you. So I think the question is, you know, how much is Microsoft saving by actually hiring overseas? Now, some people will say that the salaries are about 80% less in India than the average tech worker. Like I saw an article that said the average tech worker in India was making $15,000 when you compare that to like $107,000 for either in the United States. And then for a lot of places like Silicon Valley or New York City or Washington, D.C., those salaries are much higher than 107,000. So, you know, that is on the low end. However, those numbers seem to be overinflated because if we look at something like this chart here, this shows you some of the H-1B salaries that are being currently employed with Microsoft, and many of them are over 100,000. However, if we look at some of these, you know, these are low salaries, especially for Redmond, Washington, where it's very high cost of living. There's a lot of demand there. Nintendo of America and Amazon and all that. There's a lot of jobs out there. Microsoft. So those are pretty low salaries. So you argue that those salaries are definitely saving money over United States salaries. You know, companies have always been trying to reduce labor prices for the longest time. This is an article that goes back to 2015, but Apple and Google settled a lawsuit for $415 million where these companies were in cahoots together to actually keep the salaries of associates down because they were finding themselves in a war where they were plucking each other's top talent. So instead of them continuing to do that and paying people what the going rate was, they colluded together to try to keep the salaries down and basically agree not to try to poach each other's talent for more money so that they could keep the salaries in check. So that resulted in a $415 million lawsuit, and most people don't talk about it. It was just swept under the rug and typical cost of doing business in many industries. So Microsoft and labor unions, when we talk about what is actually going on, I mean, the question is really like, how does the United States worker compete with India or overseas workers in South America or in Poland and other places where they're hiring a lot? And the fact of the matter is you simply can't. You're not going to be able to compete on a financial level. If somebody's going to be able to work for 33% of your salary, you simply can't compete on price. So, in the past, there have been attempts at like not just, unions and but, just simply organizations and just raising awareness and trying to basically fight for worker protections and ultimately, just simply exposing companies for what they're doing. So the really infuriating thing is that if the largest IT company in the world, the largest company in the world, which is Microsoft at this point, they have a market cap, meaning overall value of $3.7 trillion. That's way more than most countries. And, they're extremely profitable. They had $82 billion in profit last year. That is actual profit, not revenue. And then they still find ways of cost cutting and that's typical capitalism and just business 101. Doesn't make it right, but that is infuriating that you can have a company that is so wildly profitable and still basically crap on all their employees that got them to that level. So going back to the how do you compete? If you can't compete financially, then the one thing that like Warren Buffett will tell you in a recession, and this guy was raised rich. He had a congressman father who owned a hedge fund. So a lot of people are like, oh, business, Warren Buffett, he has all the business advice. I mean, he was raised rich, right? So this is, he had opportunities that most you and I will never have. That's just a fact. But, he does say obviously smart things. And one of the things he said is that, the best way that you can be recession proof is to be exceptionally good at something. And I think in this industry, you're not going to be able to compete, obviously, with overseas labor, but keeping your skills up to date is hugely important. So AI, machine learning, cybersecurity, quantum computing, if that ever takes off, edge computing. Those are all things, I guess, that we could try to do to keep our skills up to date. I feel like that's a race to the bottom, though. There's no way you're going to have enough time to be an expert in all of those fields. So you do have to be exceptionally good at one of those things, maybe not one, but a few of those things. And that's probably your best bet. But more so than that is going to be capitalizing on your creativity. So that's also spreading your eggs out into multiple baskets and also just being entrepreneurial, business-minded. And those are, advantages that like nobody can take your creativeness away from you. But I do find it, somewhat frustrating. It's like, well, you just got to continue to be better than everybody else. And it's like, that's just such a burnout world that we live in. But it is the way that IT functions, right? I mean, we all see it. It's like this industry is ripe with H-1B overuse and ageism, and then there's just obviously outsourcing and cost cutting, and all of that is continuing to go on. But at the same time, you're also trying to be told to learn the next framework and the next thing, and this new AWS feature and learn all about it and learn how to implement it, and like on top of all your other skills and everything that you have to do to maintain it. So it's just difficult. It's a toxic game, really. So yeah, this sucks. I don't know that there's really any way off of this ride. The tech market will hopefully recover at some point, and then hopefully decisions made by companies that have caused this situation will pay the price at some point in the future. All right, so speaking of trying to just simply get better and do things, like one of the examples is the video game that I created that's going to be out later on this year. This is something that expanded my horizons quite a bit when it came to just artistic creativity, video game development, 3D modeling, animation, game engines, a lower level like shader codes and materials, and just there was a ton of learning that went into building this, and especially on the VR front. So those are the types of things I think that nobody can take away from you. However, I do recognize that a lot of people just simply are not able to do that sort of thing. This game I worked on for 2.5 years overall, and I prototyped it even longer than that. But it's not like 2.5 years of straight work. It was like weekends here and there, and sometimes it would only be like 2 hours in a week. So, granted, I could have done this a lot quicker if I were working on it full time. I still, it was quite an endeavor, and a lot of people just simply can't do that, and they don't want to, and I don't blame them. But those are examples of ways that you can sort of, in my opinion, overcome from an entrepreneurial perspective. But nothing says that anybody would even hire me. I've been in Fortune 500s for almost 20 years, and video game development, YouTube, and building my own platform and selling it in 90 countries. I don't think that I'm safe in this industry. I don't even know that I could find the job. I don't really know. But I do know that there's nothing I can really do about that except for the fact that I have to live with the situation. And, for me, I keep my skills up to date, I feel like, quite a bit. I don't necessarily like having to do that all the time, but it has been somewhat of a requirement. And, the video game, though, was a lot of fun to develop for the most part. There was definitely some times that I'm like, yeah, this is more work than I wanted it to be, or it's never going to get done, and all this. But for the most part, it wasn't a frustrating experience, and I learned quite a bit. And I plan to take the knowledge that I gained throughout my life with me wherever I go. And that is one thing nobody can take away from you.